In the contested waters of the South China Sea, Sandy Cay, a string of sandbars surrounded by turquoise shallows, has become the latest and most volatile flashpoint between the Philippines and China. Once a quiet, overlooked patch of sand, Sandy Cay now sits at the heart of a geopolitical storm, its fate watched by nations far beyond Asia. These sandbars, long ignored by the world, were thrust into the international spotlight in spring 2025. The standoff has become a critical test for the Philippines-US alliance, raising urgent questions about the future of regional stability and the willingness of allies to stand together in the face of growing pressure. In April, Chinese Coast Guard personnel landed on Sandy Cay, raising their flag in a bold display of sovereignty. This move was not just a routine patrol, it was a calculated act, signaling Beijing's intent to assert control over even the smallest features in these contested waters. The Philippines responded swiftly, raising its own flag and dispatching naval and Coast Guard vessels to the area. The standoff quickly escalated, with ships from both sides facing off in tense proximity, each unwilling to back down. This was more than a symbolic act, it marked a new threshold in China's strategy, daring Manila to react and forcing the world to pay attention. The confrontation sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, as leaders weighed the risks of further escalation. China's move is part of a broader campaign to solidify control over the South China Sea, challenging not only the Philippines' ability to defend its claims, but also the resolve of other Southeast Asian nations with competing interests in these waters. The world is watching closely. How far will China push its ambitions, and how will the balance of power in Asia shift as a result? How will the Philippines respond to this direct challenge? The government in Manila faces mounting pressure to act decisively, knowing that every move is scrutinized by both allies and rivals. And what role will the United States play if its treaty obligations are put to the test? The world wonders if Washington will stand firm, or if the standoff will expose cracks in the alliance. The Sandy Cay standoff is a microcosm of a much larger struggle, one that could ultimately define the future of regional security, and perhaps even the global order. Each day adds new complexity and risk to this unfolding story, as the world holds its breath and waits to see what happens next. Sandy Cay may look insignificant, just a sliver of sand surrounded by endless blue, barely rising above the waves. But in the South China Sea, even the smallest features can have outsized importance. Its location is everything. Sandy Cay sits at a crossroads of competing interests where geography and politics collide. Just 2 nautical miles from Thitu Island, home to a Filipino community and military garrison, Sandy Cay sits between Philippine-held territory and China's militarized Subi Reef. This proximity makes it a flashpoint, a place where rival patrols and Coast Guard vessels often come face to face. Whoever controls Sandy Cay can monitor and even disrupt access to Thitu Island. For China, it's a way to pressure the Philippines, threatening vital resupply missions and military operations, and projecting power deeper into the West Philippine Sea. Legally, Sandy Cay's status as a high-tide feature makes it a valuable prize for any claimant, strengthening territorial claims under international law. Its presence above water at high tide gives it special weight in maritime disputes. China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Taiwan all claim it, but China's physical presence is a powerful move to reinforce its disputed 9-dash line. Each patrol, each anchored ship, is a statement of intent. For Manila, losing Sandy Cay would be a strategic and symbolic blow, undermining its ability to protect its territory and the people who live on Thitu Island. If China develops Sandy Cay, it would put a Chinese outpost on the very doorstep of a Filipino community, raising fears of further encroachment and escalation. The sandbars are more than just land. They form a crucial defensive perimeter for Thitu Island, acting as a buffer against outside threats and a first line of defense. This is not just about sand, it's about national security, sovereignty, and the future of the Philippines' presence in the West Philippine Sea. The fate of Sandy Cay could shape the balance of power in the region. The stakes are far higher than they appear. In this contested sea, even a tiny sandbar can tip the scales. In April 2025, China landed personnel on Sandy Cay, a tiny but strategically significant sandbar in the South China Sea. The move was sudden, catching many observers off guard and immediately raising tensions in the region. Chinese troops raised their national flag in a bold, highly publicized display, with state media broadcasting the event to signal Beijing's determination to assert its claim. The Philippines responded almost immediately, dispatching a joint force of Coast Guard and military personnel to the sandbars. They planted their own flag, directly challenging China's claim and making it clear they would not back down. Filipino teams found themselves surrounded by a formidable Chinese presence. Coast Guard and maritime militia ships loomed just offshore, creating a tense and intimidating standoff. In May, the situation escalated further. The China Coast Guard used powerful water cannons against Philippine fishing boats, forcing them back and leading to a dangerous collision that could have easily spiraled out of control. This marked a dramatic shift from symbolic gestures to direct physical confrontation, raising the risk of miscalculation, accidental violence, and even open conflict between the two nations. China's actions were carefully calibrated, probing Manila's resolve and seeking to establish a new, more assertive status quo in the disputed waters. By creating facts on the ground, through construction, occupation, and constant patrols, Beijing aims to make its control over Sandy Cay irreversible, regardless of international protests. The ambiguity that once surrounded Sandy Cay has vanished. It has become a live front line, a flashpoint in the ongoing struggle for dominance in the South China Sea. Now, two nations' flags fly in open defiance of each other, a stark symbol of the deepening crisis as the world watches with growing concern. The stakes have never been higher, and the outcome of this confrontation could shape the future of the entire region. Sandy Cay is a textbook case of China's gray zone or salami-slicing tactics, achieving big goals through small, incremental steps that stop short of war. China uses maritime militias and Coast Guard ships to swarm, intimidate, and assert control, escalating just enough to avoid triggering a military response. The Sandy Cay flag raising is a new, bolder slice, moving from blocking access to physically occupying disputed land. China allegedly expands sandbars and fortifies positions while denying aggressive intent, maintaining plausible deniability. This strategy puts the Philippines in a bind. A military response would escalate, but inaction cedes ground. China exploits this dilemma, normalizing its presence and wearing down resistance. The result: slow, relentless expansion of Chinese control in the South China Sea. The challenge for Manila and its allies is how to respond without sparking a wider conflict. China's move at Sandy Cay coincided with the largest ever Balikatan military exercises between the US and the Philippines. The 2025 drills featured new elements, US missile launchers in the Philippines, and for the first time full participation by Japan's self-defense forces. This trilateral cooperation sent a strong signal of unity and deterrence against Chinese aggression. Yet China pressed ahead, using gray zone tactics that fell below the threshold of open conflict. Beijing calculated that neither Washington nor Manila would risk war over a sandbar, even with allied forces nearby. The Sandy Cay incident tested the credibility of the alliance and exposed the limits of military exercises as deterrents. The drills showed allied strength, but China's actions revealed the challenge of countering coercion that stops just short of war. The standoff was a real-world test of resolve. The U.S. response to Sandy Cay was closely watched, strong condemnation, but no direct threat of intervention. The ambiguity lies in the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. It covers armed attacks on Philippine territory, but Sandy Cay's disputed status muddies the waters. China exploits this legal gray area, knowing that flag-raising and non-lethal force don't clearly trigger the treaty. The U.S. faces a dilemma: act and risk escalation, or hold back and risk appearing unreliable. Memories of the 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff, where the U.S. brokered a deal but China never withdrew, haunt Manila. The current hesitation reinforces doubts about U.S. commitment, despite tough rhetoric. China's strategy is to force Washington into a lose-lose choice. The credibility of U.S. alliances in Asia hangs in the balance. The Sandy Cay crisis echoes the 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff, when China seized control after a U.S. brokered withdrawal. That precedent looms large, fueling fears that Sandy Cay could be lost through gradual, unchallenged encroachment. ASEAN's muted response reflects China's economic leverage. Few want to jeopardize trade for a territorial dispute. The 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties has been ignored, and without a unified front, China faces little pushback. The Philippines is caught between China's relentless tactics, U.S. treaty ambiguity, and a divided region. Manila must defend its rights without provoking a conflict it can't win, all while navigating complex alliances. The future is uncertain: internationalize the crisis or accept a new status quo. Sandy Cay is more than a sandbar. It's a test of Philippine resilience and a warning for the region. The struggle for the South China Sea is far from over.